Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. For the Saints last week, the news was better from off the field than on. But the good news was very good, as Gale Benson revealed her long-range plans for the Saints and the Pelicans. For Carnival, a meeting Thursday gave some indication of what its immediate future will be. And for some candidates, there's only a little more than a month left to determine their political future. All of this plus new information about the Hard Rock Hotel collapse and some local team prognosticating are in the lineup for tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. David Hammer, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4. Stephanie Grace, political columnist, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. And Jeff Duncan, columnist, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, and contributor to WVUE Fox 8 Sports. And we're going to stay with Jeff right now because you and the Fox 8 team also, you did a series on what you call the succession and what Gale Benson plans to do with her two teams as the years progress.
Yes, Marcia, it's a pretty extraordinary story. Gale Benson, 74-year-old owner, obviously has taken over the team now that Tom Benson has passed away, and she has no heirs. She has no children to leave the team to. So the NFL, by policy, requires the teams to be sold. Now that could happen way off. Like I said, she's 74 years old. This could not. This might be decades in the future, but they have to have a plan in case of any kind of emergency situation. And according to this succession plan, the teams will be sold probably to out-of-town ownership, just knowing the sale of these teams at this point. Both teams right now are valued combined above $4 billion, so we could be talking about $5 to $6 billion down the road. And that money will go into a trust that will be managed by team president Dennis Lauschill. There'll be an executive board that oversees it, and there's different organizations within the region, within the city, that would be targeted to receive some of the proceeds from the sale. And then the rest of the money is all going into the Gale and Tom Benson Charitable Foundation, which has been giving out millions of dollars since 2007 when it was founded. But now we're talking about extraordinary endowment of billions of dollars, be the largest endowment or foundation of its kind in the state of Louisiana. We've really never seen anything of this size. And they plan to give out grants from this foundation to different organizations within the city of New Orleans and the surrounding region for the next foreseeable future, at least for the next few decades, as long as that money lasts.
And so the idea is also is sort of twofold. You want to keep the teams here in the city, maybe not owned locally, maybe they would be, but they would remain here. Then also help organizations that help the community-wide in the region, just to have something. As you said, we've never seen something this big in the state of Louisiana, really, of how these organizations that directly work with residents in the community can be assisted, can help. It's going to be really an amazing impact.
No, it's pretty extraordinary, and Gale Benson's done this since she's become part of the ownership group and management team out there. The Benson family has given millions of dollars locally, and now we're talking billions of dollars. It's really unprecedented. I know Ralph Wilson, the owner of the Buffalo Bills, had a very similar setup, but it wasn't nearly as large of an endowment as we're going to see from this foundation. And the teams will stay here. I wrote a column about that last week. I know there's a lot of anxiety sometimes when people hear out-of-town ownership, but that's really standard operating procedure now in the NFL because the teams are worth so much. There's only so many people that are in the hunt to buy these teams that can even afford to buy an NFL team at this point. I think the last 6 ownership transfers have all gone to out-of-town owners. In other markets. They've kept the teams in the markets. And I know the Saints are doing so well here financially, and we wrote a lot about this in this series. I don't know anybody would want to move the team. They've been extremely successful off the field. They have one of the best, if not the best, lease agreements in the entire league. They've been very, very successful, rubbing elbows with the bigger market teams in Dallas and Los Angeles and New York. So I don't see any reason why anybody would ever fear, even when these teams are sold, that they're going to move.
Jeff, it seems like the real key guy right now is Dennis Lauscher, because he's still the president of both teams. Isn't he the guy who will essentially do the sale when the time comes, and then won't he be overseeing the transition to the charities?
Yes, he's the executor of the estate, and he's a local. He's a New Orleans native, Jesuit high school graduate, and along with other people in the front office, Greg Bensel, Ben Hales, also New Orleans natives. It's a very unique situation. You don't see a lot of NFL teams with this many hometown people in the front office, so I think that's a good thing for New Orleans. It should relieve some of the concerns that the team might move. Dennis Lausch has said that they're going to stipulate that the teams, whoever the new owners are, the teams are kept here. That's not just the Saints, that's also the Pelicans. And I know the NFL, it requires an ownership vote, even if you were. So I really don't think we have to worry about the teams moving down the road. And Dennis Lauscher, you're right, Errol, has become extraordinarily influential, not only in that organization, but throughout the state through the political connections that the Saints now have. I mean, they're basically a Fortune 500 company here in New Orleans. They've got their irons in a lot of different fires, more than most NFL teams in the country do.
And how about the stability of the Pelicans?
Well, I think that one's more up in the air. I don't think there's any doubt about it. The fact that they need a new arena for or some kind of long-term solution right now. If they have to renovate the Smoothie King Center, the fact that this team is so far behind their competitors, they don't have the revenue sharing plan in place like the NFL. The business model in the NBA is much different, and there's a great disparity between the large market teams and the small market teams, and it can't be really made up unless they go to a new revenue sharing plan, much like the NFL has, and I don't see that happening anytime soon. They need a new arena. I think that's what they want. We're talking a decade from now. They've already got a site targeted down near the convention center. They'd like to at least get some type of plan in place and get some funding mechanism that might make that work so they can keep this team here for a long time.
Jeff, why do they need a new arena? The arena's so much newer than the Superdome.
It's just 20 years old.
Good question, Stephanie. I mean, it's just, when it was made, it was not basketball. It was not made for basketball in mind.
Really?
It was a multi-purpose venue, and it's the smallest building in the league. Not in terms of seating, but in terms of like the big things, the suites, the lower bowl seating, which is where the premium seating is, where teams like the Pelicans can make up some ground on their competitors. And there's no real way to refurbish it or renovate it because of the architectural design. It's not like the Superdome where you have this large amount of space that these architects and engineers can work with. So they're kind of boxed in here. They either have to do a small scale renovation or look for a new arena. And again, they want to emphasize everyone involved. They're not talking about anytime soon. This is going to be something that happens well down the road, at least a decade away.
I remember that arena, ice hockey was in there too. When that was built, there was ice hockey played.
Although the idea was to attract an NBA team, I remember at the time. So.
And that it did help attract an NBA team. So, well, at any rate, what Mrs. Benson has done, apparently, Gale Benson is a New Orleans native also, and she's really thought long and hard about this. And the NFL reviewed the succession plan too, right, and approved it.
Yes,
is that correct?
And then they have to submit it every year.
Yeah.
And there's some teams around the league going through a very similar process right now. And Dennis Lauscher did say something in the story that I thought was interesting. Basically, they have about a 5-year window to find a new owner, to complete a sale. So it's not something that would happen overnight anyway. We're talking years down the road.
Okay. All right, Jeff. Great work by you both, by Fox 8 team and by you. It was really interesting to see. All right, over to David. You keep digging into the Hard Rock Hotel collapse, and you found more information.
Yeah, well, it's amazing to think that on Tuesday, that's the second anniversary of the collapse that killed 3 workers and shut down the major intersection in New Orleans for all this time. I mean, over a year where it was completely shut down, and there's still parts of that area that you can't drive through. And it had such a major impact, and to think that we're just now learning some new things. I've been looking into this for a long time, going through thousands of documents that I've been able to get through, documents that were turned over as a part of civil lawsuits. And there were issues that independent engineers commented on, but some things that caught my attention were changes that were made to the size of steel beams and columns on the upper floors that collapsed. And there was a move made to raise the ceiling heights in the penthouse levels that were the 16th and 17th floors. And those changes, which were asked for by the owner, were then turned over to the engineer to design properly, and some of those changes were questioned by independent engineers for making the building less safe. Now, I've also recently been able to get information about a long-awaited OSHA report from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration that has not been turned over but has been done for a long time, that specifically lays blame for the collapse on the two small beams that were supporting the 16th floor, so under those penthouse levels. The support there had to be robust because essentially it's like a 3-story building at the top on top of a 15-story building below, and so that has to hold all 3 of those upper floors. And the beams there were woefully undersized according to OSHA's findings. And this is really key information for developing a criminal case, which Orleans Parish District Attorney Jason Williams has taken on. And, you know, here we are 2 years in. Tuesday marks the deadline for filing any kind of misdemeanor charges. And then they have another 2 years to hit the 4-year deadline for filing felony charges. And we know that there are these families of these 3 victims who are really desperate to hold somebody accountable for the death of their family members that was so tragic. And the video that we were able to get, again, amazing that it's 2 years later, but video taken from 1010 Common, which is another Mohan Kalis-owned property, which was turned over right away, but has just now come out, and that we got a copy of that, shows this devastating disaster and the people running for their lives. And it's really shocking to see just how totally those upper floors failed. And under the weight of some of the equipment and other machinery that was up there, it just totally failed. And all of the view looking now is really focused on the weakness of the steel, and that people are saying that engineers should have been able to detect this, and they should have raised concerns about this.
What are the engineers saying who worked on this building? That they were named in the OSHA report, is that correct?
Correct. James Heaslip is the owner of Heaslip Engineering. He has repeatedly said the same thing, which is that he complied with all of the requirements and stands by his work, and he's been cited by OSHA, and he's challenging those violations and doesn't have a hearing until July of next year. Now, OSHA has not been willing to turn over its specific findings beyond those violations, even to Jason Williams and the DA's office, who's trying to use those reports to build a criminal case. And but I've been able to get information about that report and included that in our report this week.
Okay, and so that's on file, right, at WWLTV.com?
At WWLTV.com, and you can see the full 25-second video from before the collapse happens, not after, as we've seen on some of the other views. Before the collapse happens, you can see exactly where it starts, how it progresses, and see the people running away, and some of them luckily were able to escape.
It's a really dramatic video. Okay, David, I know you're going to continue on this.
Absolutely, and with the anniversary coming up next week, look for more.
Okay, thanks a lot, David. Stephanie, let's go over to you. We are in election season right now.
Yes, and it's finally starting to feel that way, I think, with Ida kind of in the rearview mirror. The election was pushed back, of course, because of Ida. Normally, campaigning starts around Labor Day. That's when we were, all still without power. So the election is now November 13th, and it's starting to get a little heated in some cases. Let's go through kind of what's on the ballot here. The mayor, LaToya Cantrell, what I would say about that race is, she has a lot of competition, but she doesn't have much competition. She has a lot of people who signed up to run against her, and none of them really have the wherewithal to put together a strong campaign. And that really tells you something, that there were people who tried to recruit somebody to take her on and who would be able to raise money and so forth, and they were not able to. City Council's pretty competitive, actually, it turns out. If you go through the races, I would say probably Helena Moreno at large and Joe Giarrusso in District A are the safest. They do have competitors, but not competitors who are able to raise a lot of money and stage much of a campaign. Otherwise, it's pretty competitive. The second at-large seat, of course, is the one that was held by Jason Williams before he became district attorney. And he is, there are 4 candidates. There are 3 of them are very well-known names. 2 come from the council, district members, Kristen Gisselson-Palmer in District C, Jared Brissett in District D, and the third is J.P. Morrell, the former state senator. Of course, his mother was on the council for a long time. Jared Brissett worked for his mother, so they know each other well, and they're starting to go at each other. And the arguments are J.P. Morrell comes in from the state senate, where he was a very kind of consequential legislator and saying things really need to be shaken up on the council side. The district members say you really need somebody who comes from that perspective in the at-large seat. Helena Moreno also came from the legislature, and I think we should certainly see a runoff in that one. If you go to B, Jay Banks is the incumbent. He's running for re-election, and he has 2 attorneys running against him, Leslie Harris and Orla Zaplatel. Leslie Harris is the former chief of staff at Loyola. She's backed by Jason Williams, the district attorney. There's a lot of politics in this one, factions. And Orla Zaplatel is the head of a neighborhood association in that district. And they're both waging pretty strong campaigns, and I could see that one going to a runoff too.
And so that's B. What about?
That's B. C, wide open. C, that's Kristen Palmer's district. She's not running for re-election. She could have. She chose to go for at-large. Bunch of candidates. A lot of them are, have experience in and around city government. Probably the front runner would be Freddie King, who has the support of Troy Carter, the congressman who's from that area. The governor, he will tell you, and so forth. So kind of the dominant political group in that district.
Okay.
But that's, Algiers, but it's also the French Quarter, so there's a lot of District D, Jared Brissett's district, another really big field. If there's a front runner, it could be Eugene Green, who's someone who people in city politics might know from having been around a long time. He's run for other office before and not made it, but he could be a strong candidate. And E is really interesting because the incumbent is Cindy Nguyen. Oliver Thomas, remember him? He's running against her. So Oliver Thomas, of course, for years was the councilman from District B and then at large, and was probably the front runner to become mayor until the day that he resigned because he was pleading guilty to federal crimes. So he went off to prison, came back, has a radio show, and he's running again. So that's an interesting one.
And so primary is, again, in November?
November 13th.
Okay, and runoffs, I mean, the mayor, do you think she'll just take it in the primary?
She could well. Again, there are, I think, 14 other candidates, so if, there's no one who is going to probably rise. But, if the field is split, if the vote splits so many ways, I think she probably will be fine.
But there perhaps could be runoffs
but there are
in the
very
council
likely
races.
to be council runoffs.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, thanks a lot, Steph.
Okay.
All right, over to E. And are we going to have our carnival? I know we will have Mardi Gras because it's on the calendar, as you like to remind us.
Right.
But are we going to have our parades?
I think so. There was a meeting yesterday with the mayor's Mardi Gras advisory committee, and the mayor showed up as she's supposed to, and wanted to see what was on her mind. And she stopped short of saying, yes, there'll definitely be parades. There were a lot of caveats that everybody expected, but the mood seemed to be one of let's do what we can to try to have them. And so it was fairly upbeat. And one thing they're doing, it's kind of a surprise, is that on the 23rd you have this crew of Boo that's parading, and Jennifer Vegno, who's the city health director, said they're going to be monitoring that crew and the people who rode in them, and look at them like 2 weeks after the parade to see how having a parade worked in terms of spreading. And so if they see that there was a big problem caused by that, it may change the thinking. But it's going to be used, I guess, as a model for what's going to happen. But overall, a clue came a few months ago when the city urged or told the captains to be sure all their people are vaccinated. And so that sounded like something like they intend to have the parades. There were several captains there, and all the captains sounded pretty optimistic. And for them, most of them already have their parades already built from last year, so they're waiting. The largest parade, Endymion, Captain Endymion said all his floats are ready. I was wondering if they get their riders back. Endymion has 3,200 riders. He says they're all in. How about bands? I was wondering if bands would come back, since they got all their bands, and so everything seems to be falling in place. October 15th is the deadlines for crews to register with the city to get their permit, and I expect all of them will. And this could just be a sense of seeing what happens to the crew of Boo, or to see if there's any kind of breakout. Now, one thing the mayor was wondering about, if there's a way to monitor the people who come to Carnival, and because she says, people come from around the world. I don't know if that'll be the case this year, because people are not sure if we're going to have parades, but she was trying to think of a way to be able to do that. Well, it'd be easy if they fly in, because the airlines check that anyway, or if they go to a restaurant, because they're checking that. The problem is people who drive in and stay with friends. How do you check on that? And so that's going to be something I have to deal with. One captain told me he thought that by the time the parades come along, there's not even going to be a mask mandate. Don't know if that's the case. That's just a speculation. And so I guess the way to summarize it, nothing definite yet, but it looks good.
Okay, in terms of like the crew of Boo, where crew members are expected to wear a mask, well, they might anyway, they probably will for Halloween, but vaccinated. What about, band members and the other marching groups? Are they expected also to do the same?
The city's health office could be monitoring everybody, yeah. Now, I got to say, the crew of Boo, even though they call themselves a crew, they're really not a Mardi Gras crew in a traditional sense. I don't think they have the same density or the same length, and certainly not the same route. But it's the closest thing we have. It'll be the first parade in 19 months that we've had in New Orleans. And so, she sounded like they're going to try to monitor everything there and see what they can learn.
Okay, thanks a lot. Jeff, we're going to wrap up with you and just sort of an overview of the sports season. Let's start with the Saints.
Well, it's been a little disappointment, I think, for everybody in the local football front. Saints are 2-2. If you'd asked me a month ago where they'd be after 4 games, I probably would have said 2-2. But how they got to 2-2 has been wildly unpredictable. They've won the 2 games they were underdogs in and lost the 2 games they were favored to win. So typical sports, right? No one knows what to think with this team. It's still, I think, a work in progress with the new quarterback, Jameis Winston. I think we're seeing a learning curve between him and Sean Payton, and I don't think that should be unexpected. People seem to forget that Drew Brees, when he started out in 2006 under Sean Payton, was not the Drew Brees that he ended up being. It took him a while. It took Sean Payton a while for them to learn each other, and I think that's what we're seeing on the field right now. But I'm still optimistic. I think this team is extremely talented. They have a lot of their elite players out right now because of suspensions or injuries that should be getting back kind of the cavalry's back in a couple weeks. And I think you'll see a little bit of a different team once they're all at full strength.
What do you expect for this weekend?
Oh, I think they'll win big in Washington. Washington's really banged up. This is and you can just sense it out there. There's no better coach in the league after a loss than Sean Payton. He's got their attention this week, and they have the bye week after that, Marcia. Then they go out to Seattle for a big Monday night game, national TV game. They should be rested and have a lot of these reinforcements back. So I expect them to go on a run here.
Okay, the Pels.
Well, the Pels are in preseason right now. There's a lot of enthusiasm. I like what I'm hearing from the new head coach, Willie Green. They've got a young team, and Zion Williamson seems to have matured. And I think he understands right now this is his team. It's no longer him and 2 or 3 other leaders. It's Zion Williamson's team. I think he's kind of reached that threshold in his life to where he's going to try and take over games. And I like the fact that he's learned that. I really think this team's got a lot of potential. I'll be shocked if they don't make the playoffs this year.
Well, we hope you're right about that. Okay, college, LSU and Tulane.
Well, LSU, I think, is something we have to monitor. I really think Ed Ogeron's coaching for his coaching life right now. He's up in Kentucky where the LSU's underdogs for the first time in 20 years against Kentucky. They dropped a very disappointing game at Auburn, and they have a gauntlet coming up. If they don't win this game against Kentucky on Saturday, then they have to go to Ole Miss, who's ranked, to the number 1 team in the country, Alabama, who's ranked. They still have ranked opponents, Arkansas and Texas A&M. It's looking tough. I don't see how Ed Ogeron keeps his job unless he wins this weekend and can kind of turn things around quickly, and they're underdogs in this game.
Tulane.
Tulane also disappointing. I mean, they dropped a big game against Houston on national TV Thursday night, and they've struggled defensively. I think that was supposed to be a strength of this team. It has not turned out that way. They lost a big game 2 weeks ago to East Carolina. It looks like a transition year for Tulane. Really not a lot of good news on the football front, Marcia.
Yeah.
I think the Saints will get it turned around, but I'm not too hopeful about the other colleges.
It's amazing that Tulane almost beat Oklahoma
I know.
earlier this year.
Yeah, and then they haven't come close to replicating that performance.
So are yo-yos still in the locker room for the Saints?
Yes.
I read that piece where
Yes,
you
yeah.
put
Sean
yo-yos in the
Payton
lockers.
Trying to send a message to his team, not to be an up and down team. Hadn't worked so far.
All right. Okay, guys. Time for other stories. We're going to go over to E now.
Well, good news for people looking for a spot of tea and some scones. British Airways announced today that it's bringing back its nonstop service between New Orleans and Heathrow in December, 3 times a week.
Yeah, that really is great news. That is good to hear. Stephanie, let's go over to you.
In addition to city council races and mayor, there are 4 constitutional amendments on the ballot November 13th. I'll be doing a town hall on NOLA.com with Robert Travis Scott, the retiring head of the Public Affairs Research Council. It's his swan song, Wednesday at 10 a.m. Hope you all join us and send questions.
Okay, yes, that should be very interesting. David.
Well, it's a bittersweet day today at Channel 4. Our executive producer for special projects, Dominic Massa, it's his last day after 27 years since he was 17 years old at Channel 4. But it's an exciting time, I guess, for Channel 12, for WYES,
Sure
because he's becoming the COO over here, and everybody can't wait for him to get over there. But nobody embodies Channel 4 like Dominic Massa.
I know you guys are going to miss him, and you're right. We're very excited that Dominic is going to be coming over here as our new executive VP and COO. Starts next week. It's a big loss for you guys, I know. But Dominic is still here, and he's a treasure,
We'll
not
still call on him.
not just to a television station, but to our community. So congratulations to Dominic twofold. All right, let's wrap up with you, Jeff.
Hey, next week the Saints are off. You're probably not going to get to see the LSU Florida game. I advise everybody, if you got a chance on the North Shore, Arch Manning, the son of Cooper, grandson of Archie, probably the best high school prospect in the history of this city, is playing for Newman against St. Charles Catholic up at Strawberry Stadium in Hammond. It's going to be a huge game. Newman should be unbeaten, so should St. Charles Catholic. And I'm telling you all, Arch Manning is a can't-miss player. If you're on the North Shore, you get a chance to go watch him next Thursday night.
Really exciting. Thanks a lot. Also, if you missed the WYES production of Irma, My Life in Music about Irma Thomas, you get a chance to watch it tomorrow night, Saturday night. It comes on at 8 and then again at 9:30, and it's something that you will really enjoy and want to see. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us. See you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.